Call to order. This is the January 9th meeting of the Grosse Pointe Board of Education. Item 1 on the agenda is call to order and Pledge of Allegiance. Would you stand, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like to introduce the board members and the people at the dais here. To my right is Trustee St. John, Trustee Worden, Trustee Jupe, Trustee Cotton, Dr. Dean, our superintendent, Trustee Pappas, Trustee Brumbaugh, Assistant Superintendent Amanda Matheson, I'm sorry, and Roy Bishop, our Assistant Superintendent. Number 2 on our agenda tonight is the approval of the board agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Brumbaugh, support by Ms. Pappas.
Oh, wait, you know what? There is a mistake on, oh, never mind. Go on.
Okay. Do we have any comments?
I have a comment, Mr. Chairman, if I could. If we could, since there are 4 committees on item, I believe, 4.2, I'd like to make a motion to separate those into each committee so that we can talk about them separately and vote on them separately, because, you know, a board member might be okay with 3 of them and not 1 of them, and I think it's only fair that we be able to discuss them and talk about each committee separately.
Second.
Is there support for that? Ms.
Yeah,
St.
second.
John? Any comments?
I would just comment that by our bylaws, the committees are to be decided by the president. That's written in our...
It's interesting because, Mrs. Pappas, because frankly, we've never gone through this process before.
No, we
as
haven't.
far as the committees. But under the bylaws, the committees are established by the board and the membership is determined by the president. So if there's board consensus that we do them individually, that's fine. Any other comments?
I don't see any harm in 4 votes.
Okay. I'll take a vote on that then. All in favor of dividing the item 4.2 into 4 separate sections, so each committee is voted on separately, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
It's
Thank
5.
you, Mr. Chairman.
5 to 2. Okay. Let's move on then. We have got the agenda. We have public comments on action agenda items. So if we have any public comments on the organizational meeting minutes or the establishment of the committees? Okay. Terry Collin, non-action items, and last week's board meeting would also be... No. Thank you. So we have no comments on action agenda items, so we'll move on to those. Item 4.1, approval of organizational meeting minutes of January 4. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes as written?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mrs. Pappas, support.
There's just a small typo on the 3rd page.
I'll second the motion for purposes.
January
Okay.
10, 2022 to January 10, 2023. And then the same on the next 2 pages, just a date issue.
Got it. Super. Thank you, Mrs. Jupe.
Thank you.
Is there so we'll move forward to approve it with that correction. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Okay, so we have 7-0 on that. Next, we go to the establishment of committees. I emailed everybody, and Mrs. Fuga was kind enough to repost the committee memo agenda 4.2 that I had prepared, and on Sunday afternoon, I received some changes to those committee engagement details that were forwarded to me by a number of board members, which I incorporated into the document that's you have in front of you that shows revised. So we'll start first with the Community Engagement Committee. The intent of that, and I'll go through each of these items. First of all, to receive, generate, and consolidate ideas and questions and review them with the administration and the board, to organize a series of town hall meetings, to develop new outreach vehicles to realtors and new families, to ensure that information, outreach, and activities proactively include residents without students in the district and seek their input and feedback. Work with the administration and board to develop messaging and engagement programs to support the bond and millage proposals, and to receive requests from the board and refer findings and proposals to the board for consideration. Do I have a motion that that committee be formed? Mrs. Pappas,
I'll
Second.
support Mrs. Jupe. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would appreciate an explanation as to, with respect to 1.1, how would that work with the board interfacing with the communications team? I mean, as I understand it, for instance, if we could just deal with the email first, the email comes in, it appears that there's some sort of research with the communication team. They gather their information and they respond to whatever information comes in. So how would that work with a board member or committee? So I'm guessing that the committee would only work or meet, once a week or once a month. How would that work to work with the communications team to deal with that particular issue?
Well, I'll leave that to Mr. Brumbaugh, since that was your addition.
So I think the important change from the original language that I tried to highlight, Trustee Warden, was that it's not that everything necessarily goes through there, but this is one way in which people can communicate with the board, whether it's through town hall meetings, you see somebody at Kroger, we have some other, they come to the committee meeting. The idea being that the committee would take that kind of together and, eliminate duplicate questions, come up with themes, then have a discussion about it. And it doesn't eliminate the rapid response communications, feedback, or when somebody calls Dr. Dean, it just creates another vector for people to have that communication with the board and then to get kind of responses or to have discussions with the communications team about feedback. Is that a fair kind of summary?
So if I could follow up, are you saying this is just more like an overall communication with our communications team to try to come up with some sort of consolidated message from our board?
Well, my position on that is that the reason for the Community Engagement Committee is we have so many people in the community that are not parents, and we have to develop better ways to communicate with them. And the purpose of this committee, frankly, is to come up with any way that we possibly can to communicate with our community, let them know it's the great things that are going on in our schools, and frankly, to help out the communications team in making that message happen, making that a reality.
To follow up on that, just like I'd said initially, there are lots of different entry points, so this would just be one into communicating with the district. Lansing Public Schools has a similar committee that they believe they call the Parental Community Engagement Committee, or something like that, where they have more informal meetings. You can have presentations to the community on different issues. They can hear ideas. I think they use Title I money to provide babysitting and pizza. They've got different needs than we do. That might not be the case here. But it's just another way to do it. It's not eliminating or kind of funneling everything through one funnel.
Any other questions? Mrs. Pappas?
Thank you, President Ishmael. I just wanted to, I think this is a really great way to continue dialogue between the board and the community. And I know one of the things that I heard when I ran 2 years ago, and I continued hearing through this election cycle, is there's a lot of concern with, getting more interactive with city councils and kind of looking at our whole area as a whole, working with realtors, which is one of the things here, finding ways to market our community and, let people know, because we do get a certain number of people that move into our community for, we have 3 major hospitals right here in our neighborhood, as well as many other, businesses downtown and whatnot, and it's really should be a vector to really kind of come together and work together as a community, because I feel like sometimes we're very separated. We've got the city of Grosse Pointe, we've got the Woods has their thing, the park has their thing, Harper Woods has their thing, and we really should be working collectively as a group of people and as a community, because we have one school district that serves all of us, and we have common goals and a lot of common goals and things that we can, I think, achieve if we're working more collaboratively. So, and I think it's a great way for the board to connect more with the community, because we all know that we get, we have all these emails, we have phone calls, we meet with people individually, but there's kind of a disconnection, I think, and I think this will be a really great way for the board to reach out and be more accessible to the community, and for all of us to sit down and kind of decide, what we have in common that will help our community and our schools and our vision. So I think it's a great idea.
Thank you, Mrs. Pappas. Any other comments?
I just have a question about the
Mrs. St. John?
makeup of the committee. Is it going to be 3 board members and some other members of the community and administration and staff, or is it just going to be 3 board members discussing and then passing on their ideas to the communications team, or do you have another idea?
As far as the composition of each of the committees, that's, as I understand it, under my purview, and it's not going to be all board members. My intent is to get the community involved.
So you would like community members on the...
Without question.
Okay.
Without question. That's the whole goal here. We've got a massive brain trust out here in this community. We're not using it.
Absolutely.
Any other comments?
I'd also say that it's not just the residents without students who we want to reach out to, it's the residents with students that are in other schools.
That's an excellent point. It's an excellent point, Mr. Cotton. Thank you. Are there any other comments? All those in favor of forming the Community Engagement Committee, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Passes 7-0. Next item is the Curriculum Committee. I'll walk through the points on that. The Curriculum Committee is intended to assist the administration and board in developing and evaluating the district's curriculum, to review reports and proposals from the administration and the EPLC prior to presentation to the board, conducts proactive engagement such as visits to other school districts to assist the administration and board in learning about new programs and methodologies, provides oversight over the administration to ensure that our programs fully comply with federal and state requirements related to educational programs and students with special needs, assures that the curriculum being considered for adoption is consistent with the district's mission and taxpayer expectations, and receives requests from the board and refers findings and proposals to the board for consideration. Any questions or comments on that? Mrs. Worden.
Mr. Chairman, my issue with this committee is that in going through the Educational Program Leadership Council that the district already has, it seems like a lot of this is duplicative, and my concern is that we are going to overstep on this committee. This committee is composed of teachers, administrators, students, parents, community members. So how is this different from the EPLC?
Well, I look at this committee, I'll give my point, and then you guys can each step in. You board members can each step in. I look at this as a filtering mechanism, and I just look at it as one extra step that gives the board more information and more input on where we're going with curriculum as far as the community views. And I don't see it, I see it as an add-on. I certainly don't see it supplanting EPLC. I look at the EPLC, frankly, as more of an administrative committee and governed by the administration. I don't look at it as a board committee. And at least that's my opinion.
If I could follow up, please. But how is it different than the committee that we already have? Because I mean, if you look through our website, it gives a pretty good instruction of like the curriculum that we have, how we've come to adopt that curriculum, the state guidelines, and it seems like there's a host of people that are on this committee, including community members. So I guess I'm just trying to look to see how it's different than the committee that we already have, so that we're not doing duplicative work.
Well, this committee it will be receiving information from the EPLC. They'll be reviewing it before the board reviews it. Mrs. Pappas.
Can I speak on? From my perspective on this, and I looked at a lot of other school districts. There's quite a few school districts that have a curriculum committee. And it's really supposed to be a broader, bigger view of the curriculum. And we sit here and we vote on, the English department brings us this program, and this department brings this program, and we have to vote on those things. And I know as somebody who's taught at the secondary level for the last 12 years, there's a lot of moving pieces, especially at the secondary level. And having a bigger view of the curriculum from a board standpoint, I know one of the issues that we, discussed and was discussed during the election season was the CTE program. So if you put a CTE program in, you have to have enough teachers to teach it. It has to fit in with the arts department and the PE department and the social studies department and all of those sorts of things. So when we're sitting here and approving a program, and as a teacher, I find it very disjointed when I sit up here and I vote on one program kind of in isolation without really having a bigger, view of how our curriculum components work together. And this is really supposed to be a bigger, broader view. And I really, as a teacher, I also want to make the point that the point of this committee is not to micromanage the teachers in their classroom. As a teacher, I wouldn't want, every 5 seconds the Board of Education coming and telling me, this is what you're going to teach exactly, this is what you're going to do. That's not the point of this. The point of this is for us to understand in a bigger picture view so that when we are using our resources, especially our financial resources, how are we allocating, our funds, what programs are a duplicate, or how are they working together? And it's really difficult to do that when you don't have any insight into that larger process. And I will say from our tours that we took, which were wonderful, by the way, Thursday and Friday, seeing every building in the district, and I'll come back to that later tonight. I want to thank Dr. Dean for that. But it was really, I had 6 kids go to South, and I went through the tour of South, and I went through North, and I saw programs and things that I wasn't aware of. And I've been in this district for a long time as a parent. So I think that there's a lot of things, and there's a lot of great things going on in our district, a lot of programs, but it's hard for us to vote intelligently when we don't know how sometimes the parts are working together. So I think this is, and it's a very common committee. In fact, I looked up our neighbors, Detroit, for instance. They have a curriculum committee. They have a finance committee, a policy committee, a legislative committee. They have a code of conduct committee. They have an exceptional student education committee and a public safety committee. So, this is not something that's unusual by any means, and I think it's been much needed for some time in order for us to understand how all those parts are working together. And that's how we're going to make better decisions as a board when we have a better view into, what we're offering as a district and what we're offering from elementary to high school. I think we do this really well overall already. One of the things that really denotes a good school system is when the elementary level prepares in whatever subject, take math, because that's a simple one to kind of lay out. But if, you have a good elementary math program that leads you into the middle school math, and then the middle school math program leads you into the high school math. And we have programs that, are offered only at one high school or the other. So, those are other conversations, that we have to have. We have some wonderful, really amazing programs. And having an understanding of how those all work together, I think is really important for us to make good decisions as a board, so.
Mr. Brumbaugh.
I'm really glad that Trustee Pappas mentioned that the purpose of the committee is not to micromanage the administration or teachers, because I think I had a lot of the same concerns that Trustee Warden had mentioned, and that I heard from members of the community that reached out to me, sort of, what is this thing and how does it fit in to the other things that we're doing with curriculum. And we have to recognize that there's a lot of community unease about kind of what the election means for how teachers teach and what we're teaching in Grosse Pointe Public Schools. And there's also a lot of interest in those questions, right? So in my mind, a committee like this plays an important function by taking the big picture look that Trustee Pappas mentioned and creating a forum for us to have discussions around curriculum that protect the work of the EPLC and the other administrative committees and don't turn that into kind of a public forum, right? They're allowed to focus on the expert work they do. They refer stuff up to the curriculum committee. The curriculum committee can be where a slightly broader discussion's had before that work is then referred to the board for a community-wide discussion. And the same goes for the other direction. The board receives a question, the curriculum committee has a question, and it can be referred down the line for study. So I am like anything, you know, the relative effectiveness of this will depend on implementation, but I think that it's definitely an idea that speaks to a need in the community. We just need to be, you know, I wanted to make sure that we were kind of clear and careful about how we talked about it so people could understand the benefits of it without, you know, feeding into some worries that we all have to be honest exist in the community as well.
Thank you, Mr. Brumbaugh. Ms. Worden.
I just have another question. I guess I'm just going to take a couple examples that we've had come before our board. Like, for instance, we had a presentation by our wonderful literacy coaches. And we also had a presentation, I think it was at the end of December, about a new literary program. How would this work, I guess, functionally? Like, would it come to our board meeting, and then it would also come before the EPLC? I guess I'm trying to figure out what would be the purview of what this committee would, like, would they come to our board meeting first? Would they go to the EPLC first? How exactly would that work?
I don't think we've worked that out yet. We haven't worked that out. I mean, because frankly, we have to sit down with the folks at the EPLC, and we have to, this is a work in progress. I mean, we're starting something new we've never done before, and it's a work in progress. And the bottom line, our business is curriculum here. And I think it's deserving of the same attention that we give finance and facilities and policies and everything else. And that's,
One more thing on that.
go ahead, Mrs. Pappas.
You know, the curriculum, like you said, is our business. That's what we do. So I think part of this also is, you know, taking programs and looking and seeing what are other like districts doing? What are other successful districts doing? Is what we're doing always working? Sometimes we do things just because that's the way we've always done them for 20 years in Grosse Pointe. And maybe there's a different idea out there that we haven't considered. So I think seeing what other districts are doing is important, and having that information feed in. And then this is a recommendation. It's, you know, it's very much, I mean, we were on the facilities committee. People would come and do a presentation to the facilities, and they would give recommendations, and then we would go to the, you know, the larger board, and usually it was pretty much the same presentation. So it's not as though there's nothing out of any of these committees that is being decided. They're simply gathering information, discussing it, digging more in depth. We certainly, as 7 people up here, don't have the time to dig into each part of, you know, what board business is, you know, in serious depth in all the, you know, in all those different subjects. So I think, you know, dividing up the work and focusing on these different, and coming up with some recommendations. It gives us an extra time outside of this meeting, and then we bring the recommendations and the board votes on them. So it's very much like what we've done already, you know.
Mrs. Jupe, I apologize, I cut you off.
Oh, it's okay. I think it, you know, it really brings the subject to the forefront, and it offers transparency, it offers trust back to the district, and people want to know what's going on, and here's a great opportunity through this committee.
Thank you.
So I'm for it.
I just have one
Ms. St.
question.
John?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
You're pointing it down this way.
Sorry, that's okay. So I just wanted to underscore what Ms. Pappas was saying about how similar to the facilities committee, our facilities committee doesn't go telling our facilities managers and building administration what they can and cannot do. We're about gathering information and being able to take more time in the committee meetings so that these meetings don't go regularly past midnight.
Bingo.
Ideally, this year we will not have that so much. So that, and I agree that the curriculum is one of the most important things in our school district. So I look forward to having the opportunity to learn more and get more in depth about what our curriculum is. And I just wanted to underscore that based on my understanding of what these committees are going to do, especially the curriculum committee, we wouldn't be able to overrule the EPLC or dictate any curriculum. We're simply gathering more information, being able to ask more of those questions in a committee meeting rather than up here on the stage while everyone is fatigued
And I
after
think
11 p.m.
on each of the items, the last bullet point that was added there was sort of to underscore that point. And that
Yeah, I appreciated that change.
these
Thanks.
committees are here to receive requests from the board and refer findings and proposals to the board for consideration. They're to serve as filtering mechanisms and try to move things through and for us to be able to absorb more information efficiently. Are there any other comments?
I just have one
Mrs.
final
Worden.
question for Mrs. Pappas. Do you know, Lisa, if any of our peer districts have adopted one of these committees? I know you mentioned Detroit. Were there any of our peer districts that have adopted this?
There is. I did a lot of, I just kind of did an overview and was clicking, but there are definitely peer districts that have them. And there's definitely districts around the country that have them, both in Michigan and out of Michigan. And I could, if I had spent a lot of time, I would have written all of them down. But yeah, it's not an unusual committee at all. It is a very common committee in school boards. So we're
Any other
not doing anything
questions?
outside the box.
Okay, with that, we'll take a vote. Let's do a roll call vote on this one. We'll start with Trustee St. John,
Yes.
Trustee Worden,
No.
no, Trustee,
Yes.
Trustee Cotton,
Yes.
Trustee Pappas,
Yes.
Trustee Brumbaugh,
Yes.
and I'm a yes, so it's 6-1. We have a curriculum committee. Next, Finance and Facilities Committee, and if we want a budget, we need to do this committee. So I'll go over basically what the Finance and Facilities Committee is charged in doing. It's going to assist the administration and board in developing annual budget parameters, reviews the district's facility usage and need with administration and its facility consultants, develops finance and facilities-related communication tools so that taxpayers easily find information on our district website, requests and reviews reports on the district's financial metrics and considers these in relation to statewide trends in our peer districts, provides ongoing budget oversight throughout the year, and as the other ones, receives requests from the board and refers findings and proposals to the board for consideration. I could give a little background. We've had a facilities committee here for a number of years. If I go back in time, when I first joined the board, we also had a finance committee. And they sort of got mushed in and out. We had an audit committee, then a finance committee. So it's a very common thing to do, and the reason I made it, I felt we could, because they're so intertwined, I felt it made sense that they be one committee. Mr. Brumbaugh, I cut you off, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, not at all. I was trying to jump in too soon. I appreciate it. That was getting to my question, which is previously we had a very small finance committee and kind of a very active facilities committee. So I just wanted you to talk a little bit about why you thought that those two things should be put under one committee. And I think you started talking about that in
Yeah.
your comments, so sorry if I stepped out.
And that's basic, that's really the bottom line. That's the reason I felt it made sense for them to be together. We're dealing with the same, Mrs. Matheson is involved in both, and they're intertwined, and I just didn't see any reason to have two meetings when they could be in one. And any other comments on the Facilities and Finance Committee?
You need a motion first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have a motion that we form?
Sorry, just
I
trying to be
apologize, I'm glad you caught
trying to be
that.
helpful. Just for the minutes, or it'll be really weird.
Right. Do we have a motion to form a Facilities and Finance Committee?
I'll move to form.
Okay.
A support.
Thank you. Now that we've had discussion on it already, let's have a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Say nay. 7-0. Next, we go to the Policies and Contract Committee. The duties of that committee are to assist the administration and board in reviewing and advising development and updated board policies, bylaws, and administrative guidelines, assist in review and negotiation of district contracts and service and employment agreements, and again, receive requests from the boards and refer findings and proposals to the board for consideration. Any comments or questions on that committee? Seeing,
It would
well,
just be the.
here I go again.
It would
We have
just
a
be the-
motion to form that committee.
Oh, I'll move to form the committee, I suppose.
Okay.
The question I had is the same as under
Thank
the
you,
Finance
Dr.
and
Dean.
Facilities Committee, is we had a policy committee before. I'm familiar with how that operated. Can you talk a little bit about the contracts function that you see the committee taking on and why putting the two together made sense for you.
Well, I see that we have certain contracts that we review on an annual basis, and I felt that it made sense for this same committee. They're dealing with a lot of structure, things that are involved in the administrative guidelines that have to dovetail together, and it made sense to me that they be together.
And I'll say from having served in the policy committee, I think we had one of the closer relationships with Mark McInerney, the district's
Without
legal
question.
advisor, who I think it's a separate legal advisor, Mr. Garrick, that advises us in some contracts. Dr. Dean, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you do most of the actual on-the-ground work with the stuff. But
And it's important to note, and I know Mr. Ishmael and I spoke about this, when it comes to preparing for negotiations, and this is the word, I think we're using contracts two different ways. Sometimes we mean a collective bargaining agreement, which is our agreement with our employees, and a contract might be something like a formal relationship we have with an entity or an individual.
Right.
CBA work, in terms of parameter setting, would still be the purview of the Board of Education. That's a legitimate reason to go into closed session.
Without question. Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing no questions, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of forming the Policy and Contracts Committee, say aye.
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 Opposed? 7-0. Okay. That concludes that agenda item. The next is action agenda items for January 23rd, 2023. We'll have the approval of work session meetings of January 9. We'll have the approval of Human Resources Report of January 23. We'll have the adoption of 23-24 budget parameters. I'd like to talk about that for a little bit if we could, because we have a number of new people on the board here, and because budget parameters is really a flexible and very fluid document. It's handled by the treasurer, Treasurer Cotton. I went back and I made some copies of the budget parameters that we had back in 15-16 and one that we had back in 2010. So you could see, and I'll pass them out. In fact, let me just pass these down. They're clipped together, and I just wanted you to take a look and just so you have them, so you have some ideas as to what can end up in these budget parameters. And what I would like is that any of you on the board who have items that you feel are relevant and that should be included in these budget parameters, that you get them to Mr. Cotton no later than this Friday. And our goal is to get this budget parameter drafted and get it out to everybody. And correct me if I'm wrong, Treasurer Cotton, that our goal is to get that so that we have it drafted with out to people, was it mid-next week? Was that the goal?
Yes, to get to the January 23rd meeting.
Because we have it's scheduled to be voted on the January 23rd meeting. Now, if there are board members that do not feel comfortable doing it that way and you want to schedule an additional meeting to review it beforehand, we need to know that now so we can get that meeting on the docket.
And I'd like also to thank Trustee Warden for getting her budget parameters to me already.
That's great. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Brumbaugh.
Do you foresee, so the last 2 years I've been on the board, the budget parameters have been kind of the same language, and the variance has been the list of, and for the 2015, 2016, it's 10 items, but I think it may have been a couple more or a couple less the last couple of years. Or do you see having a bigger discussion about, is the 2011, 2012 parameters memo you provided is formatted a lot differently? So I guess, can you give us a sense as to
I think we're
what
going to end up
kind
in the
of
middle.
input and discussion?
I mean, that's my gut feeling. Go ahead, Mr. Cotton.
I think that the 2011, 2012 budget parameters that President Ismail gave out is closer to what we're looking for, what I'm looking for, what I think that we'd like to create.
So, I mean, we do have the opportunity, if you would like, to schedule and it's totally up to you, folks. We could schedule a meeting to go over these before the 23rd board meeting that we vote on them, or we can go over them. You can send your input into Treasurer Cotton. I'm open for suggestions on how you'd like to handle it.
So the first section involves kind of major revenue categories and assumptions about per pupil funding increase, decrease in certain number of students, increase in categoricals. This is, of course, just an example, not what it would necessarily be for this year. And then assumptions about increasing and decreasing expenses. The next section is about class caps and the number of kids in the class. And then an analysis of, looks like special education programs, and then the specific areas of focus on page 5. So without, making you sit here while I read the whole thing, the first section seems more like we have to have the same assumptions before we can kind of decide, like, okay, so we have the assumptions as to what the budgetary picture will look like for the year, and then what the goals are. Are we all going to discuss what our kind of goals and objectives are, and then do like what, say, a Dearborn Public Schools does, and kind of have a different scenarios to say, hey, if we have a increase, we can do X. If it's level, we're going to do a few things less. If it's a decrease, a few things less than that. Or I guess I want to make sure I do the homework the right way, is the question.
I think that getting those large buckets that you're used to, I believe, over the last couple of years is what we should have by Friday. Mm-hmm. I've asked for more information from the administration that I think would help out with what you asked for with the beginning pieces of the 2011-2012 budget, so we're all on the same page. And as we go through that, we could line those up and come to a resolution. But I think that probably comes to what you were talking about, President Ismail, about having another meeting possibly, because we're going to have to do this in 2 parts. But I think getting these large buckets by Friday, I think would be helpful, so everybody lays them out, and then we get those assumptions and then work from there. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It does. I know we're operating on a compressed timeline. Is that going to be, for administration, realistic with the other duties that you guys have to complete in the same time frame to get all the stuff needed for the assumptions piece at the beginning of it?
So since we're all kind of like, do you mind if I go?
Go right ahead.
So since we're all kind of working on this in this space, I'm just going to say this piece. I was just pulling up the meeting minute archives from 2011 when this pulled from, and this budget parameter then was done wasn't done in February and March. Because I was wondering how they got to this level of detail around, especially on the revenue side. Because there's stuff in here that we typically wouldn't know for quite some time, like anticipated state aid increases and whatnot. And I haven't done a deep dive, but it does appear as though they had a special meeting, for example, on February 28, 2011 to discuss these. So that implied to me that they weren't approved until March. I'm not advocating we push down till March. That's not what I'm saying, but I would say that there's no way Mrs. Matheson and I could give you a reasonable estimate of revenue, for example. I mean, we haven't even met with the new legislature hasn't even been seated yet. So I'm not saying that to be obstinate. I'm saying that to be transparent. There are some things in there that we wouldn't, that level of detail or granular detail, I agree, we'll get all the stuff Mr. Cotton asked for, but that material was for what it's worth. And if I get this wrong, let me know. Were really expenditures to actual sorts of questions over the last couple of years. They primarily this year, actually. So
Yes.
it wasn't revenue sorts of pieces. That would be the administration's biggest concern, is estimating revenue is very hard in a week in January.
Well, why don't we do this? Treasurer Cotton, you're meeting with Mrs. Matheson this week?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't you give us, the two of you put your heads together and tell us what the best way to go is. If we need to schedule an additional meeting on the 30th, we'll schedule an additional meeting.
So can I make a suggestion?
How's that? I'm sorry, Ms. St. John.
So first, I want to thank Ms. Matheson for answering our 1 million questions, especially as new board members. I know we've been peppering you with questions this first week of the year, and thank you for patiently answering all of them and not being annoyed by us. My suggestion for this is, it seems like we all have a good idea of how we can do the 2015 to 16 and some of the more recent years budget parameters where it's, more high-level goals. Obviously, not participating in schools of choice is typically one of the first things, and just general ideas. And then it sounds like we want to get a little more detailed this year, which I can understand since we've been having some problems with the fund equity dropping. But to Dr. Dean's point, we're not going to know all of the numbers that they have in this. So would it be possible to pass the parameters that are more high level at the next regular meeting and then maybe look more down the road in detail for budget parameters? Or is that not feasible to like amend it later to meet with our high level goals?
Mrs. Matheson?
So I do have a meeting with Treasurer Cotton tomorrow, and we can talk about these items more then. I think some of the things that are included in the 11-12 budget parameters are somewhat consistent with the way we have presented the budget, original budget with explanations as well as budget amendments, sharing explanations for variances that we're proposing. And the resolution example from 1516, although different from the one that I attached in the board packet, is a little bit more comparable to what we've been doing the last couple of years. That all that being said, it is the board's budget parameters, so if you so choose to amend them at some point in a future meeting, I think that it's within your purview to do that as well.
So it's possible to have these higher level goals and then amend them to be more specific once you have more information about the revenue? Would that be acceptable so that we don't have to squeeze more meetings in before the deadline?
Well, the deadline we're setting a deadline. The deadline of January 23rd is something that's self-imposed. So to the extent there's no state law that I know that says we have to have a budget parameter passed, and I don't believe it's even in the policy manual.
I mean, my understanding is we have to have
Go
the
ahead.
budget by July 1st. That's by statute.
State law.
And backing into that in a reasonable manner for the administration is absolutely what I'm looking to do as well. I think we'll have a better idea after tomorrow's meeting, and I think also after getting a finance committee up and running, what that trajectory will be.
Okay.
Okay.
So why don't we plan on that direction then? And we'll look to a recommendation from Treasurer Cotton and Mrs. Matheson.
Okay.
As far as if we need another meeting, fine. If we don't, then we'll go accordingly. If everybody could still get their budget parameter ideas in, that would be awesome. I'd appreciate that. That's budget parameters. Is there any other comments or anything, any other questions on budget parameters before we move forward? Okay. We're moving on to board request new business. We had an item 6.1, Board of Education meeting start time. This is something that I asked Dr. Dean to add because frankly, when we just talked about the date change last time, I neglected to bring up the start time that he and I had discussed. And there had been some requests that we move the meetings to 6 o'clock. There have been requests that we leave them at 7. There have been requests that we go to at 6:30. And my recommendation at this time, and I'm hoping we have board support on that, is that we split it down the middle and we move to 6:30 p.m. It works well for the tech crew. It works well for the board members who are coming from distance, and it gets us to public comment a little quicker at the end of the meetings and if we start at 7. And so I guess for lack of I guess I would take a motion. We might as well formalize that. Do I have a motion that we start our meetings at 6:30 p.m.?
I'll make the motion.
Mrs. Pappas, thank you. Do we have a second? Support?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mrs. Jupe. Is there any discussion on that?
Mr. Chairman. Oh, go ahead, John.
Mrs. Worden. Oh, go ahead.
So I'm just going to repeat something that I got a text about from the administrator sitting back, you know what I'm saying, and they gather things. And there is a community member here who is concerned, and I'm just paraphrasing, this isn't my concern, but her concern, there was a woman who said, someone here wants to talk about the Board of Education start time, which is a request and not an action item, which is true. It's not under action agenda.
Okay.
And she goes on to say, and this is via the text, she's concerned that the community hasn't had an opportunity to provide the Board of Education feedback on that because they couldn't have given the feedback earlier under public comment on action agenda items.
Okay.
And that's just that person's concern. And that's not my concern, that's just the concern. I wanted to share it with the Board of Education so they heard that.
Okay.
I have a comment too.
Any other comments?
I'll just, chime in. I mean, I did, some legwork looking at different things. Bloomfield Hills starts theirs at 6:30. Detroit has 5 and 5:30 for theirs. Some of them, at least what I found. But I mean, I found them all over the map, 7 o'clock. 6:30, 7 o'clock seems to be the golden time for most of the districts. It's a half an hour difference. I think it's a nice compromise. We were going to go to 6. I think that does put some stress on people that are trying to come from jobs that especially might not be close into the community. It's only a half an hour, so we're not talking about a huge change. It does give us a little bit, half an hour earlier before we go home, because I know I've been here at times that left and gotten home at midnight and had to get up at 5 a.m. to go to work, so that's always not fun from my perspective. But to me, it's not a big deal either side of it, as long as we're not making a huge difference. I mean, I saw one place that had a 3:30 meeting. I thought, wow, that's really not very friendly to people that do have jobs. So, I mean, I think it's a half an hour difference. I don't know how much time we want to spend spinning our wheels on a half an hour. So, I'm fine with, whatever.
Mr. Brumbaugh, I see your
decision
brain
is.
churning.
No, I would just reiterate the concern I brought up with you earlier is, setting a time that works for people so they can kind of get here after, work, after their after-school activities, after dinner. And I don't know if maybe 6:30 is a good middle ground there. I don't know. I guess I would wonder if the board would entertain a motion to, suspend the rules and move this after public comment, or move it to be considered at the next meeting, just so we could at least hear public comment on it before we make the decision.
Okay,
I have a question about, you said that there's been requests to move the meeting time earlier. Were those requests from board members or from members in the community?
From both, actually.
Okay, because most of the people that I've heard, I've actually heard from some Brownell parents that they use this space, sometimes almost until the board meeting is getting prepped. So I would be concerned if have we reached out to like the Brownell PTO and all the other organizations that might be using this space to make sure that they didn't already have things planned before the board meeting, that they sometimes use the space. I wouldn't want to cut off their extracurricular activities without plenty of advance notice.
Totally agree. Well, why don't we do this then? We'll just put it on next meetings as an action item for next meeting.
That seems fair. Thank
Mrs.
you.
Worden?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. I think for transparency, we should let people comment on this, but I do appreciate the compromise to 6:30. I think that 6 o'clock is really early for people that have to work and commute from a location, but 6:30 seems like a much better compromise than 6 o'clock, and I appreciate that.
Very good, thank you.
Oh, so I'll move to postpone that item to the next agenda.
We'll
that's
add
what
it
we
to
have to
the,
officially
as an
know.
action, in other words, we'll have that as an action item agenda for January 23rd. Next, item 7 is, do we have any other board requests? I'm sorry. Any other board requests for information or of any kind? Mr. Brumbaugh, I see the brain churning. Okay. Okay. Item 7, future meetings. We have a Board of Education regular meeting at January 23rd, 2023, 7 p.m. at the Brownell Multipurpose Room. We have a Board of Education workshop, which is at 6 p.m. Should we change that?
Yep, that works for me because it's an onboarding training, so it's not necessarily for the public.
Well, it's
Is
a
that what you're
public meeting,
asking?
isn't it?
Oh, it is a public meeting. If we do change the time, I'll just need to double check with our
tough-
consultants.
it's
That
tough
doesn't,
with him.
that doesn't mean he can't, but I just want to double check with Rod.
The public can come, but it's not like, they're not probably going to want to. They can, and I have made it clear that it's a public meeting, but that, to me, that time is fine because
Okay,
it's
so we'll
not as
leave
if
that
they
at-
need to
We're
give
going
their
to leave
public
that at
comment.
6 p.m., or is that,
That's
Mrs.
fine.
Worden, does that work for you?
That's fine. I mean, I've had plenty of notice for that, and I
Okay.
do believe it's been published in quite many places. Thank you for
Thank you.
asking.
I apologize. I did remember my board request, if that's okay to
Go right
take
ahead.
a step back in the agenda. I did receive a couple questions requesting an update on the status of the recount and the cost of the recount, whether that was going to be borne by the school district or the city of Grosse Pointe Park or some other, or the candidate. So I don't know that we have that answer at hand. I certainly haven't received a bill myself.
Look to Dr.
but
Dean.
We can hear about it
I
later.
can fulfill that request. We have not received a bill, and I have no intention of asking for one. In the event that we receive a bill, recognizing both from a transparency perspective with the 7 board members up here as well as the community, we will certainly forward it along or pass the information along to the Board of Education and make an announcement at the next board meeting. But we have not yet, and I'm not asking.
I won't bring it up again.
Now that you've televised the need for it. Thank you, Mr. Brumbaugh. Next, we move on to public comments on non-action items. I have 3 people that have registered. I'll read the standard speech. We welcome comments and questions related to matters within the purview of the Board of Education. Prior to addressing the board, we recommend that speakers first discuss their topic and seek resolution with relevant staff and administrators, culminating with the superintendent. The board will not discuss individual student or staff matters or pending litigation in this forum, and the chair will rule those comments out of order, as well as any commenters who use inappropriate language such as profanity or other language that disrupts the order of this meeting. Comments are addressed to the chair and are limited to 3 minutes, but we are happy to discuss any matters further outside this formal meeting. When called to the podium, please state your name and city of residence. I have 3 folks here that have registered. The first is Beth Pellegrini, Grosse Pointe Woods. Beth, thank you for coming tonight. Go right ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm Beth Pellegrini, Grosse Pointe Woods. I have a son in 8th grade at North and a daughter in 2nd grade at Ferry, and I'm here to talk about the start time, so thank you for adjourning that till the next meeting. I appreciate it. So I understand there are several attorneys and doctors on the board. I work as an office manager at a mid-sized defense law firm in Troy. I feel that the lawyers and doctors here would understand how much time and hard work the staff for you do. You can agree that trying to get all of their work done in time and home for dinner and to the board meeting before 6 would be very hard, even a hardship. So I'm asking you to please reconsider moving the time to 6. Or as attorneys and counselors, to meet your clients halfway and find a different solution. You did mention 6:30. I consider that fair. I just want to make sure that you give your clients several months before you make the change or come up with a different solution than just 6 o'clock. That's all I
Thank
would
you.
request. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Next, we have Terry Collins. And after Mr. Collins is Christine Roncourt. I apologize if I said that name wrong.
Hi, good evening. Terry Collins, Grosse Pointe Park. So there was a long discussion about Community Engagement Committee. I'm not really sure why. Based on the enrollment losses over the last couple of years, I would think that should be probably the most important committee that you formed. And what's also important about that committee is that things that we've heard about in the last year at various board meetings should be filtered through that committee before they ever come to a board meeting, like when we were told by Plant Moran that 590 homes weren't in Grosse Pointe anymore. I mean, that was clearly proven wrong. In fact, the overall housing units in Grosse Pointe and all the Grosse Pointes actually grew during that time period. But when information like that comes out to the public and has to be vetted by the public rather than by the board and administration, I think that's just not good work. The curriculum committee, again, a lot of discussion about why we need a curriculum committee. I'll just go back to December of last year when we voted, when the board voted to approve the strategic plan, which included allowing the REI Council some oversight or input into the curriculum. Nobody raised a flag at that time that we allowed the REI Council free access to what happens in our curriculum. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. In terms of transparency, so why is transparency so important? Well, you spoke about it a lot last week, but let's think about what happened in the last couple of years again. In June of 2021, we were told that we were going to increase our head count by, I think it was 145 to 7047. We lost 407 students in the October head count. But again, in the vein of transparency, you're about to develop your budget for 2023, 2024. Your October headcount numbers have still not been revealed to the public and to the board. How can you have had a GAA number 1 in December without understanding what your headcounts were? Your revenue is directly affected by your headcounts. And the $8 million loss in your fund equity is directly related to the 800 students you've lost in the last 2 years. So going into your setting your budget parameters without understanding what your headcount is crazy. And if we just look back 2 years, in 2021, after your headcount was the first week, second Tuesday in October, by the 12th of October, the district had already released what your enrollment numbers were. So all we heard all fall was how great they were looking. What are they? I mean, if somebody knows them, I'll give you the last 10 seconds to tell us what your October 2022 headcounts were. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Collins will get that information to you. Thank you for the request. Ms. Roncone, I know I'm butchering your name. I apologize.
Good evening. I'm Christine Roncone. I'm from Grosse Pointe Park.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry for the earlier interruption. Thanks to all our continuing and new board members for your work to support our students, teachers, parents, and community. I'm concerned that one of the first actions taken by Trustee Cotton was to request a vote to hire a separate legal counsel from the one already in place that works to inform and protect the entirety of GPPSS, including the board. This was not an agenda item and only appeared to be a surprise to 3 of the trustees. The 3 trustees just elected to office appeared to me to be unsurprised. This was amended to go to vote as a search, but was not allowed further discussion, but pushed to a vote. What is the purpose of a separate legal counsel? Are you planning actions that need protection from? This is from trustees that have complained in the past about fiscal responsibility. Also, it was my understanding that GPPSS already had a very equitable curriculum committee that's been operating without issue since 1986. It's comprised of educators, parents, students. Seems very equitable to me. They state in the regulations that they report to the Board of Education, and I think I need further clarification of why we need to amend this, or what the purpose of an additional committee would be. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Taryn Laughlin, and after Ms. Laughlin, Alyssa Garuli.
Taryn Laughlin, Grosse Pointe Park, but I also teach at South, and I'm also the co-president for the Grosse Pointe Education Association. I was not here last week when all of you, were sworn in. So first, I wanted to say congratulations to our new board members. I also was listening to the committees, and I missed the public comment because I was running a little late, so I apologize. But I'm looking forward to hearing some more information. I know that we had some teachers who were concerned specifically about the curriculum committee, and in listening to the conversation, I feel a little less anxious about that, but definitely feel as though we do need to have a little more information about what that's going to look like. And as you said, Mr. Ismail, you're in the beginning stages of that. But I do want to, as someone who sits on the EPLC committee and see the work that goes into it and the people who are involved in it and the expertise of not just the teachers or the administration, but the parents from the community as well as the students who serve on that committee. There has never been excuse me, a meeting where no one gives their input or asks some sometimes very tough questions, because we believe that that's the avenue for that to happen. So when something comes before the board, we feel it has been fully vetted. And if not, you know as well as I've been up here speaking against something when I don't believe in it. So I do want you to please just consider the expertise of the people who sit on EPLC and kind of take that into consideration so that we don't end up in a situation where people feel like their expertise is not being valued or that their toes are being stepped on in a sense. It doesn't sound as though that's where we're headed, but I did want to vocalize that, publicly so that the community understands, what's involved with the committees that are formed. So thank you. I look forward to us working together and being a part of those conversations since, without us, we don't really have a product to deliver. So
That's exactly right.
thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Garula, please.
Good evening. My name is Elisa Grole. I'm a resident of Grosse Pointe Park. I have 2 children at defer, and I, like many of my seeming neighbors here, have some real dis-ease about a curriculum committee and also the sort of unusual decision of Trustee Cotton to just bring in separate counsel. It really sounds like something that could use quite a bit more scrutiny before either of those things are approved. And as someone else mentioned, is there a reason that the board should be considering its own actions to be somehow separate and actionable from the district? So that's one concern, but also I just would really, really like to echo Taryn's sentiments about the EPLC being the avenue of expertise for curriculum as it stands, and also what Trustee St. John said about making sure that this curriculum committee cannot override anything that the board, does, or cannot override the EPLC, that the curriculum committee is not a body of witch hunters, which is what we have seen in other districts. So we talk about peer districts like Dearborn, like wherever else, where those curriculum committees have done some pretty harmful stuff. And I know that it's very unpleasant to think about us being like that, but I think it's incredibly possible. It doesn't take much for people to get really, really wound up and to start behaving in ways that they might not necessarily have considered themselves doing. And I think that anything that we have to do with curriculum, whether it's more gatekeeping, which is what it honestly sounds like, is always, always done with an eye toward protecting our most vulnerable students, our most vulnerable students, not attitudes floating around, not people who are uncomfortable with people's choices, but our most vulnerable students should always, always, always be our primary concern. So if we're thinking about curriculum, we should always be thinking about who could be truly harmed by this. And that is what I think that is the most important thing to think about with regard to a curriculum committee, and also why such a body would need its own council. Thank you.
Thank you. Final speaker, Michelle White.
Good evening. I'm Michelle White from Grosse Pointe Park. I have 2 children at South, a freshman and a senior, and I've had 4 children at school here at South who have since graduated and gone on. I watched the live stream of last week's meeting, and first of all, I echo the concerns about the curriculum committee. I am going along with it, hoping for the best, but I really don't want it to become what has happened in other districts regarding curriculum, and I am concerned, as other commenters have said, I'm concerned very much with those who struggle the most, those who are at risk, those who are of color, LGBTQIA students, and all of us. We all hurt if they're hurt. I want to make sure that all the curriculum includes voices in our English curriculum, social studies, history, whatever. I want to make sure that we're thinking of them. But I watched it last week, and I was really concerned about hiring separate legal counsel to represent the board. It's clearly, that decision has, or that even looking into it, thinking about it, clearly has nothing to do with providing a quality education to the children in this district. It clearly has nothing to do with fiscal responsibility or finding ways to increase enrollment. I think it has everything to do with advancing personal agendas, and I think it has everything to do with making certain board members feel more comfortable sitting on this board. Why should we, the school community, stand for this? Why should we be paying for an extra attorney to weigh in on school issues? What reason have you provided that would justify this expenditure? Has the district been getting bad legal advice? Let's hear about that right here, right now, because I've never heard a single complaint about the legal services provided in 14 years of having children in this district. To me, hiring another attorney isn't about the kids and a quality education. It's about something else. And I ask that you refrain from doing so and get down to the business of supporting our administration and teachers in educating our children and meeting the challenges of the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we will move on. Now, I want to make a real quick comment. I had, and I don't mind the clapping, but it was brought to my attention by a board member that they didn't feel the clapping was appropriate. I've made my comment. So, well, that clearly is inappropriate and disappointing. We'll move on now to other comments from board members and superintendent. And I owe an apology to Mrs. Matheson and Mr. Bishop, because I didn't give you a chance to make a comment at the last meeting. And I apologize for that. So we'll start with you first. Do you have any closing comments?
I don't have any comments.
How about Mrs. Matheson?
No comments.
Okay, thank you, and I apologize for doing that. I didn't mean, that was unintentional. We'll start with Ms. St. John.
Yeah, so it was alluded to earlier in the meeting, but I don't think everyone knows that the board had a chance to tour all of our school buildings last week. We spent all of Thursday and Friday visiting every single building in the district, and it was lovely. Every single building was filled with adults who genuinely want to make sure that our kids feel safe, feel included, and have everything that they need to learn. And the best part was, most of the kids were like genuinely excited to learn. And I have a middle schooler, as I know Ms. Warden does. So if you have a middle schooler, you know how amazing it is to see a middle schooler excited about anything. So I was just so impressed with all of our buildings. Every time I thought, oh, this has got to be the best school. I mean, I wish my kid went here. Then we'd go to another building, and I was like, oh, I wish my kid could go here. This is great, too, for different reasons and for obviously a lot of the same reasons. Just we have so many great teachers and staff, and I want to make sure that they feel appreciated and valued in our district. And I want to make sure that they don't feel anxious by some of the changes that the board is making. That's definitely a concern that I've heard from other people besides Ms. Laughlin here at the public comment. I don't want the committees to be seen as a way to meddle in what the teachers are doing or override their authority. My understanding and why I voted for the committees is my understanding is that it's more about information gathering and a way for us to learn more and get more in depth into understanding everything that our school district does so that we can lead better. But I will continue to watch and make sure that these committees, since they are not the entire board, they cannot make decisions about what we're going to be doing in our district, since the whole board has to vote on that. That has to come to a public meeting. So hopefully some of the things that you've heard tonight have assuaged some of the anxiety. I know change is always anxiety inducing, especially because we have only been board members for a little over a week and we haven't earned your trust yet. So, well, three of us, but obviously the board as a whole operates as one. So we, as a new board, haven't earned your trust yet. So I hope that we will earn your trust during this year. And I really want to thank everybody who came tonight tonight and listened politely and shared your thoughts with us, because that's what we need. We need the community to let us know what you need, especially about, even little things like time changes. We're here to serve you and not do just what's the most convenient for us. So let us know what you need as far as that goes. Thank you.
Ms. Worden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a segue to what Ms. St. John said, is middle school information night is tomorrow night at each of the respective middle schools. So if you have an incoming fifth grader, I would encourage you to go and visit either Brownell, Pierce, or Parcells. You will find all sorts of amazing information. I know when I went, it was just a world of information. And, as an incoming with a parent with an incoming fifth grader, you feel a little bit intimidated because it's a different school. And I know that my fears and some of my anxiety was very much satisfied after, or it was taken care of after I went to that. So I would encourage you tomorrow night, 6:30 at each of the middle schools. I want to thank Mr. Chairman for moving the vote on the time change. I think it's really important for our board to make sure that we don't vote on any sort of action item until the board or the community has had an opportunity to hear about it, that it's been on the agenda, that it's been vetted, that people can come to the podium and talk about it. Even if it's something that's innocuous, seems innocuous, like a time change, it's not innocuous to working parents like myself who are rushing to get out of there at 5 o'clock and then have to travel sometimes 30 minutes to get home and sometimes get a bite to eat before we come back here. So I appreciate the willingness to move that, because we have to be transparent at a board and make sure, as a board, and make sure that people know about what we're going to vote on. My last comment is about the curriculum committee. I think it's going to be really important, and I mentioned this last week, that all of us go to the onboarding on the 25th of January. That's at 6 p.m. It's a public meeting, and we really will learn what the role of our board is. I know I did it, and it's really eye-opening to see that our role as board members is actually quite limited. It's statutory, and what we do as board members is sort of dictated by the statute. So what concerns me about this curriculum committee is we already have a pretty spectacular and amazing EPLC that's consisted of teachers, administrators, principals, parents, and students. And all of the different items that were mentioned in this proposed committee, or it is a committee now, are all being addressed by what Ms. Laughlin spoke of, and that's the expertise of people who were educated to train our students. So I am very concerned that our board doesn't overstep, sidestep, or try to micromanage what teachers and what educators do as far as curriculum goes. I know that having sat on the board for a couple years, that each time there's a proposed curriculum change, that Dr. Hartley or Mr. Howell are very diligent in getting us the curriculum changes or what's being proposed, so that we have a very ample opportunity to review these changes or what's being proposed. And oftentimes those board meetings are pretty lengthy, because there's a lot of information that we receive about the curriculum. So I'm still not comfortable with this committee, and I think that we should leave curriculum to those who were trained to become educators. Thank you.
Trustee Jupe.
Thank you. It has been a very busy 5 days, getting sworn in on Wednesday, touring for 8 hours on Thursday and on Friday, and
We're
then...
just getting started, dear.
We're just getting started. Yeah, so it's been great. It was great seeing, the teaching in action and viewing all the buildings and seeing some old faces that we dearly love. And I'm just glad to be here and continue on.
Thank you. Trustee Cotton.
I would just like to thank Dr. Dean and the building administrators and the teachers for the tours on Thursday and Friday. It really was a eye-opening experience just to see the kids and the teachers and the facilities and the breadth of our operations and the special needs and all of our facilities. And so I just want to thank Dr. Dean here, and I think our union president, I think she might have left, but to thank her, she showed us her classroom.
Oh, there
And
she is.
Okay.
Stand up,
behind
Karen,
the screen.
take a bow.
Thank you very much. And all the teachers were very enthusiastic, and it was really great. They invited us into their classrooms. We met children. It was just a really great time, so thank you.
Thank you. Do you want another term, Mr. Bishop? No. Ms. Matheson? Okay. Mr. Brumbaugh?
I'd also like to echo thanks to Dr. Dean, our principals and staff, and our kids for welcoming us into our schools for some wonderful building tours last week. It's always just wonderful to walk through there and be reminded that our facilities would be the envy of any school system in the United States, and many colleges even. I mean, I don't know a lot of places that have 2 complete video production studios, a massive ceramics lab, that a workshop that goes to so much clay they need their own extruder, a planetarium, pools at all of our middle schools and high schools. There's some really phenomenal facilities. And while, per the Plant Moran report, we have an estimated $252 million in facilities needs anticipated for the next 10 years, these are facilities that are worth fighting for. Because it really enables us to continue that standard of excellence that people are used to with a Grosse Pointe education. It was also a real pleasure to see our excellent teachers at work and the joy on our kids' faces in the classroom. And also, usually we only see Dr. Dean in this very formal setting here, so it was refreshing to see his strong and positive relationships with so many of our staff and students. I think one elementary schooler at Mason actually heard his voice in the hallway because he'd been their mystery reader and rushed out and gave him a hug. And that's not the usual reaction we see at the board meeting. So I can't promise more hugs, Dr. Dean, but it was really great to spend that time with our district's leaders as well as with our new trustees, and have that informal time for us to kind of see each other and build relationships as well as see what's going on in the school district. I'd also like to echo Trustee St. John's comments about communication and trust, and reiterate that with any change, regardless of who gets elected, anytime you have change, people worry about what's going to happen or what people's intentions are and what this is going to mean for them, whether that's a parent or a teacher or a student or an administrator or a member of the community, who might hear different things from different people and not know what the facts are. So I just reiterate that it's important for us to earn and build trust with our community and staff, and that transparency, clarity, and frequent communication are all important to building that trust. And it's also important to ensure that the district embraces the best ideas when we make our decisions. So I have a lot of hope for the new committee structure. I have a lot of hope for the new board, and I think we'll see some really great things in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Pappas.
Yeah, I'd like to start off again by thanking Dr. Dean. I know we've heard it over and over and over again, but this
He's going
was...
to get a big head out of all this stuff.
I know, right? But, thank you. It was a very well-organized tour. It takes a lot to get through all the buildings in a district in a day and a half, basically. And so it was very well thought out, very well organized, and it was, Dr. Dean, it was my absolutely favorite moment being on this board in 2 years. It tied in. I mean, we sit up here, we vote on what's going on in that building or this building, but to actually go in physically, and it was cool because my favorite part about it was actually during the school day, because I had gone when I first got elected, and I'd seen some of you. I met Deputy Superintendent Matheson to kind of look at some of the facilities. There's a big difference between going after school and being there when the kids and the staff are there, and you really see, like, boots on the ground, what's going on in our schools. The staff couldn't have been more gracious and more kind. The principals. I mean, it's just exciting to see all the cool things going on in our district, and to see the commitment that our staff has, and the engagement our students have. Calm students that, understood procedures, I don't care what building we went into. Everything very well thought out, very orderly. So many of the cool things. I mean, going in and watching at North, you know, the TV production team getting ready to, you know, tape their morning announcements and, you know, doing the test run and getting to see all the TV production equipment, seeing the robotics lab, you know, the pottery studio. I'm echoing a lot of things, you know, Trustee Brumbaugh said. But we got to literally go through each facility. The beauty of our buildings, too. I mean, we could have spent all day, I think, going, oh my gosh, look at the Pewabic tile there. Oh my, it's beautiful. I mean, we have some beautiful buildings and beautiful people in them and beautiful students. And the one thing that really struck me is how great the students were together in each class and how well they worked together. And I thought that, you know, if we all worked together as well as those young people, they could probably teach us a few things because I mean, they were really kind to each other and just, it was really great to see whether it was a kindergarten class or, you know, a high school class. It was really, it made my whole start to the year. And for me, and I'm trying not to keep this short and not emotional, but I've been off work on family leave, you know, as a teacher. And I went back to my classroom today. And when I went into those classrooms last week, and I was like so excited today to come to work and see those and experience those things again with the kids. And it's really, it's an amazing thing. And it is, if it did anything, I think it should be, I told Dr. Dean, I think it should be a yearly thing because it was a nice bonding. We got to spend some time with the new trustees. We got to all, you know, go tour these buildings together. And it was just, it should center our focus on why we're here, why we're up here. You know, we do all these votes and things are kind of, you know, there's all these different issues we have to deal with, but that's what it's about. And when you go into the classroom and you see the kids and you see the staff, that's what it's about. And they put in a lot of hours and they're very dedicated and we're very lucky to have the staff that we do. Keeping our kids safe, teaching them, inspiring them, it's a hard job. I mean, I know firsthand it's a hard job. And they come in and they do it despite whatever's going on in their personal life. You know, their kid is sick at home, whatever it is, they come in and they do for other people's children. And so I want to give kudos to every staff member in this district for everything you do, principal, teachers, secretaries, custodians. It's a team effort. Every single person plays a part, and I'm just thankful that we have all these wonderful people with our children. And I just want to, you know, bounce off, going back to the committees. As a teacher, I have seen firsthand my whole life. I'm the daughter of teachers. I'm a teacher. My father, as a matter of fact, was very active in the teachers union when I was growing up. I have seen what people in politicians in faraway places have done to education. And we're all bearing the results, every school district. I don't care what school district you are, when people that are far removed from education make decisions about education, it's not always in the best interests of our students. And so often, as a teacher, our voices are often silenced over and over again. So the last thing I want as a teacher on this board, as a parent of students that have come through this district, is to make teachers and staff feel that the board is making the decisions for what they're doing in their classroom. But it's really hard to put curriculum as money, right? It costs money. Every program that we provide, and my gosh, that tour, I mean, the TV production studios, the arts programs, we went into the band rooms and the choir rooms and we see the equipment that we approve. They all cost money. And so those programs are really important to our district. We want to make sure that our district is offering everything we possibly can afford. And it's really, when you talk to curriculum, we want to make sure our curriculum is giving everybody, and that goes for if you're going to go to college, if we're going to put a CTE program in, if we're going to, we have special needs students, and they have unique needs. We want to make sure that as a board, we're providing them the best possible facilities and programs and everything and support for the staff. And I don't see how we can support the staff when we're so disconnected from the overall picture. So rather than micromanage a teacher, I'm looking forward to having those conversations because the teachers, when you sit down and talk to them, will tell you what they need, and they will tell you, principals and teachers, they know what they need in their buildings, they know what they need in their programs. And if we don't take the time to have those conversations, we make decisions up here that sometimes might not be the best ones. It's not about micromanaging at all. It's about having conversations, making recommendations. And I, for one, want our teachers and our staff and our EPLC committee, I want their voices to be heard. We want to hear your voices. We want to hear more of those stories so that we're not just voting up here out of context on a program, and maybe one person in the one group in the community doesn't want that program and another group does, and you've got warring interests. It's up to us up here to make the decision and make the best decision and it's not about like I said, it's not micromanaging. It's really putting a picture together, making sure our curriculum is strong, that it focuses on every learner in our community, whether it's a special needs student all the way to somebody who wants to go to the top university. We want to make our program strong. So that's what curriculum committee is the intent. It is not to take away and to make decisions for things that we shouldn't necessarily be making decisions for. It is to get the voices of those leaders in our community and in our buildings, and then be able to build on their recommendations and their decisions. And so I look forward to it. I think it's going to be a very open conversation. I have a lot of respect for our staff, and seeing what I saw on those tours, I think all of us walking around those buildings, we were so impressed by what we saw, and the smiles on the kids' faces, and the different activities that the teachers did to get the children's attention, to introduce a concept. In one building, they were going through safety procedures, and I think it was the principal, I'm trying to remember which building. Yes, Monteith. And she said, I think you're going to want to see us model this. And so they modeled like the safety, and the kids showed us what they had learned already. It was obvious that they had been well instructed and they knew what the safety procedures were. And it was just awesome to see it in practice. So I just want to, reassure that this isn't, politicians in Washington, D.C. passing rules that all schools have to follow. And you know what? Grosse Pointe Schools is Grosse Pointe Schools. We are a unique community, unique school district. I think that's true of every school district. Each one has their own community, their own needs, their own focuses, and we need to be able to make decisions for our community. That's why we sit here. That's why we send our children to these schools, right? So I wanted to put that piece into it, and the community engagement. I think it's just putting some pieces together so we have this bigger view, so we can make better decisions, so we can meet more people. Because I'll tell you what, when you have conversations one-on-one with people, and we go into the buildings and we talk to the principals and we talk to the teachers, you talk to parents and these different things, you come to a different understanding of what goes on in the community, rather than just yelling back and forth, at meetings. We have more in common than we don't, and I think we will get to that place where the commonalities and the working for the greater good is where we're going to be going with this. So, yeah, I'll wind it up. But thank you, Dr. Dean. I really did love that tour.
Dr. Dean, it's your turn.
First, I want to wish good luck. Our high school students next week have their exams, and I want to wish, so for some of them, it's their first exams ever. For our 9th graders and for our 12th graders, you're almost done, but good luck on your exams. I want to thank the Board of Education for going on the tours with me. They gave me some credit that I didn't deserve. Taking people on a tour in our district with the kids we have and the adults we have is easy. It's easy to look good. So anything that really went well during those tours wasn't because of me, it was because of them. I also want to thank the Board of Education for going on those tours, not just to see our buildings and our kids, which was great, but to start forming relationships and connections with each other. Unfortunately, in the world we live in now, the 7 of you who volunteer to do this and then run for office, et cetera, you do it in this completely complicated, messy, unnecessarily polarized world, which tends to highlight differences versus similarities. So no matter how you got up here, you get here because you win, but then it's like, how do we govern from a coming together perspective versus our differences perspective? And I think that first happens when we start to form relationships. And I saw those pieces, and that's a we statement between the administrators, the board members, and amongst and with each other. So thank you for the opportunity. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that I don't like about being president is that I get to speak last. Everybody got my thunder. So the The comments regarding the tour that we had are well-placed. I thought it was was put together very, very short time span, by the way. I asked Dr. Dean to schedule that, and he did it 3 days later, and it was great to see the kids and see a little young guy putting his hand out. Hello, Mr. Ismail. Thank you for coming to my building. It was so cute. But I searched and searched for places I swore in buildings that I had attended that I'd carved my initials. I could not find them. So somehow they've been, and I've searched places I know that were not renovated. So I don't know what happened to those initials. But we have a great school system. We've got a lot. We've got so much going for us. We are so blessed here. And it was so abundantly evident when we went on our tour. Just there's so much magic happening here. And we may argue up here at the table, or not even argue. We have fervent discussion. And we're all here for the same thing. We all want the schools to be the best they possibly can be within our budget. We want to deliver to the taxpayers the most that we can for their school investment, their very generous investment. And we'll continue to work to do that. And we may work through these committees, and we may tune some of them, and they're works in progress. And I'm happy that we have 7 people up here, plus 3 administrators, plus the group that are in the back silently. Do you have any comments you'd like to make back there? I feel guilty because we've left you out of the gig here. But, okay, if you ever do, come on up here, okay? But we're blessed in this community, and I'm excited about the charge that we have in front of us, and I know we're going to do the best we can for our community. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.